Welcome to the Crafting Character Podcast. Steve Carter here in association with my good friends at Preaching Today, The Ascent Leader, and Food for the Hungry. I bring you a conversation around the craft of preaching, but always wanting to help you have your character lead the way. Today, I have the chance to interview a dear friend, pastor in Silicon Valley. He's making his second appearance here on the podcast. It's Pastor Jay Kim. He leads an incredible church, Westgate Church, and he's somebody who I just adore and love listening to. He spoke recently at Lafayette, Colorado at a church called Flatirons in a series called Digital Hygiene. And when you're a pastor in Silicon Valley, you understand these things because many people within your congregation no social media, no technology. And what I love is that Jay, right after COVID, drops a book called Analog Church. And it was so helpful to so many. And now today, he's dropping a new book called Analog Christian. And I just love this conversation about not just the dangers of technology. People talk about that all the time, but really what it's doing to shape and form us. And I love the bent. And I think this is so important for you to know, but also for us to be aware as we pastor and shepherd our congregation. So like we often do, I want to give you a chance to hear Pastor Jay Kim's sound. Listen to this.
2 Peter chapter 1, the writer, Peter, he says this: His divine power, God's divine power, has given us everything we need for a godly life through our knowledge of him who called us by his own glory and goodness. Now, if Peter ended his thought here, the internet would be perfect. The internet would be all we need. Because again, the internet offers us more knowledge, more information, more quickly, more accessibly than any generation, any tool or device before. But Peter does not end here. In other words, knowledge is important, but it's not enough. He continues, through these, he has given us his very great and precious promises, so that through them, you may what? Participate in the divine nature, having escaped the corruption in the world caused by evil desires. For this very reason, I love this phrase, make every effort. Then he continues in verse 10, my brothers and sisters, make every effort to confirm your calling and election. What the Bible makes clear is that if you want your life to be formed into the sort of life God longs for you to have, the sort of life you deeply long to live, a life of meaning and purpose and joy, then just knowing the God stuff, knowing the Christian stuff is not enough. You have to participate. You have to make every effort. The late, great Dallas Willard put it beautifully. He says that grace is not opposed to effort, it is opposed to earning. I think we get this wrong often. You cannot ever earn grace. If you were able to earn it, it would cease to be grace. That's called a wage or payment. So grace can never be earned. It is always a free gift given. And so it is with God's grace. You cannot earn it, but once you have received God's grace, make no mistake, it demands participation and effort from you. Otherwise, we have to begin asking, did I really fully, deeply receive that grace? In other words, do I truly understand the weight of the cost, what it cost Jesus to give this gift to me? When we understand that reality, effortful participation and response is the natural byproduct.
Well, Jay Kim, thanks so much for joining us on the Crafting Character Podcast. We just heard a clip from a recent teach you gave at Flatirons Church, all in this series called Digital Hygiene. You're week one, you're a guest. They love you though. I watched the whole teach. I'm actually teaching a few weeks later in that series, so it's super fun. Yeah. But I'm curious, give us a little sense of what that whole teach was about and what you were trying to accomplish.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Steve, so fun to be back with you, man. You're one of my favorite people on the planet. So this is a good time. I don't know if anyone else is going to have a good time, but
we will.
Yeah, we're going to have a good time. Yeah, obviously I've been thinking about digital technology for a really long time, and thinking about it in terms of what it's not just what it's doing for us, but what it's doing to us. So when our mutual friend, dear friend, Jesse DeYoung, who's on the executive team there at Flatirons, told me, hey, would you come out and teach on this? But not just that, I was really thrilled because he said, no, we're actually going to do a full series, and Steve Carter's going to be a part of it. And I was really excited. Yeah. So really, I guess my approach to the whole thing is I was talking to Jesse and sort of learning about the community, which I think that's just so vitally important, especially when we're not teaching at home, just trying to figure out what do these folks need? Where are they at? What are they struggling with? It became pretty clear that, just setting up the tension, like pointing out the problem. Because I think, especially with technology, we sort of, and this isn't, this is self-indictment if it's anything, because I do this all the time. We sort of live oblivious to the issue. And I think, things are changing a little bit. I mean, like, millions of people have watched that Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma, and Tristan Harris, and his whole concept of, if technology is free, it's not really free. It just means you're the product, So all of that stuff, I think that's bubbling up to the surface. So it was really fun because essentially the assignment I was tasked was to come in and just explore that reality, try to unpack that reality, and set up the rest of the series and the rest of the teachers who I think are going to sort of dig in deeper and hit on sort of nerve endings, when it comes to how technology needs to be put in its rightful place so that we can be formed into Christ likeness and not have technology hinder that, but really accentuate that and move us forward in the right direction.
Talk about that from a guest preacher. You're coming in. It's your first time you've ever taught at Flatirons.
Yeah.
Everybody uses social media for the most part. Everybody has, for the most part, a smartphone. Yeah. Everyone is, probably has phantom vibrates when their phone is too far away. Like we have this, but you're coming as a guide, as a pastor, and you do this so beautifully. Again, the things I respect about you, your love for the text. You always point me to Christ, and when I'm listening to you at Westgate, or just when I'm reading Analog Church, or the newest one, Analog Christian, you have this ability to do that, but you also don't shy away from tension and the ache and the problem. And it's one thing when you do this at Vintage Faith, where you had been for many, many years in Santa Cruz, or you do this at Westgate, where you are the lead pastor. Talk about some of the learnings when you're stepping in and how to do that well. Because I feel like you do this so naturally, where you expose the ache, but you don't like shame the ache. You don't mock the ache, but you expose it and then attack it in a beautiful way. Talk about that in your message prep.
Yeah, man, what a great question. Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind, and this might just be my personality, it certainly it is the influence of incredible teachers in my life, both near and far, that I've learned from. But I don't think that, generally speaking, especially in church contexts where people are coming to hopefully experience spiritual transformation, I don't think people really primarily lean into content. I think they lean into people. So when I'm going to a place where it's not home, I mean, obviously, like you said, here at home at Westgate, there's the advantage that when I get up there, most of the people, not all the people, most of the people know me. There's a level of trust. There's a rapport. But even still here at Westgate, it's kind of like commonplace for all of our teachers, not just me, to get up. And we almost all of us, like robots, kind of start with, hey, I'm Jay. If we've never met, so glad you're here. Really thrilled you're here. And then there's typically always it's not necessarily like a story about our family or anything, but there's always, we try to push for some sort of humanizing element at the beginning. So, a very simple way to do that, a lot of people do this, it goes back to like the Andy Stanley model, which has been so helpful. It's like, I try to talk a lot in the sort of plural pronoun, like us and we, to begin. Because really what I'm trying to do is set a tone that this is not like the Christian professional on a big stage here to tell you why you're wrong and give you the right answers. This is actually just a room full of broken people. And yeah, maybe like I have the mic for the next 35 minutes, but really this is a communal experience where we're hoping that the word of God infused with the power of his spirit can do a transformative work in all of us. So some of that is in the language I use. A lot of it, I think, is just an embodied presence. I pray this prayer all the time, anytime I get up to say anything to any group of people, whether it's like thousands at Flatirons or, 10 people in a small meeting. I just ask God, help me not to try and be anything other than faithful here. So not flashy, not impressive. My goal isn't necessarily to make you laugh or to cry. My primary goal is just to be faithful to this moment and faithful to what the Spirit of God might want to do through the preparation for sure, but also just in this moment. Dallas Willard has this fantastic thing he used to say, and I actually heard this from John Ortberg. He used to say to John all the time, John, the most important thing that happens in a sermon, the most important moment is the moment between when the words leave the speaker's mouth and right before the words enter the listener's ear. And what he meant was the most important thing in a sermon is what the Spirit of God does in the exchange. So I try to think about sermons as gifts, not that I create to give away, but a gift that has been given for me to steward and give away. So if I'm doing the work, then in the preparation process, I'm creating and crafting for sure, but primarily I'm receiving. I'm receiving what God has, not just for me, but for the people that I'm going to share those words with. So I'm just trying to steward that gift and then as faithfully as possible, share that gift with others. So in a new environment where I don't necessarily know the people and they don't necessarily know me, without saying what I just said, I'm trying to embody that reality that, this is the word of God given to all of us. And just my small part in this exchange is to steward that word and then disperse it communally amongst all of us. And then it's up to God, it's up to God and the person, what they want to do with it, which is also actually like an immensely freeing way to think about the sermon. I used to put all this pressure on myself, like, man, they didn't laugh enough. They didn't cry enough. And that's sort of by God's grace. I think that pressure is sort of off now. It's a gift I've received to steward. I've done the work and I've tried to be faithful and I've shared the gift. And then that's that. I move on with my day.
So good. Michael Jr., a comedian, he once told me, for so many years he'd get on stage and he needed the room to laugh to validate his, existence or his profession as a comedian. And then it all switched and he realized, oh, no, I have this gift that I get to steward and they can choose to laugh or not, but I'm giving them a gift, and there's this sense of this idea came in my brain and God gave it to me. And how do I give that away? It's a beautiful way that you said that. And once again, another Dallas Willard story that just, I'll be sitting on for years and years and years. It's just like, that changes everything. I'm curious because the whole book, it's in some ways a follow-up to Analog Church. You coming out today with Analog Christian. And I'm sitting here and what I felt like the book did for me, it exposed, and I'm just quite honestly, is the best book I've read this year. Like I'm so proud of you. I think it's, and I think it speaks,
thanks, man.
One, because of how much I needed this book for my own life. I do most of my work on my phone. I write my sermons on my phone. I only use my laptop for podcast interviews. Like I don't really use my laptop.
Yeah.
I listen to audiobooks on my phone. My whole life is my phone.
Yeah.
And sometimes my Sabbath gets hijacked by my phone. And it's not even like me doing email, or doing social media, but it's the audiobook I choose to listen to ends up being in sermon prep. It's just all of this constant digital noise and this busyness. And the word I just kept like circling and underlying, and I found myself writing in my own journal about was just the word content. And it's like you offer this word, this opportunity of what Paul would kind of talk about, knowing the secret life of contentment. Like I just feel like that it's there, and yet my whole life is on this thing. Yeah. And so it's like trying, and yet the more beautiful vision of what I want is contentment, but my whole life is on this thing. So just the way that you talk about it, not shame it, but the questions you ask, the curiosity, just step us back a little to where did this kind of idea come from? Like where did this, like the genesis of Analog Christian, come out of?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you, Steve, for this really generous and kind of you to say. And it came from the same place that, you're resonating with as you read the book. It just came from my own very, it wasn't surprising, but it was a little bit shocking when I sort of took a step back from my own life years ago and realized how tethered I was to this device. And like you said, it's not even all bad stuff, but I was finding that I was so tethered to it that the digital addiction was actually having real ramifications in a physical, bodily way. So I think a lot of people relate to this. Several years ago, I found myself almost like a weird tick, like going to my phone and unlocking and opening it, and then realizing, I don't have any sort of reason to unlock and open my phone. It's just a physical tick. Like if my hands are idle for any length of time, what they naturally will do, I still struggle with it, like what they naturally will do is just reach for this device. I also found myself unable to wait in lines without my phone. I think a lot of people can relate to that. The grocery store, the DMV, waiting in line to order my lunch or whatever. If I wasn't with another human being, and then sadly, even sometimes when I was with another human being, I would find myself physically in these environments that have been commonplace in my life for decades. But now, because of the advent of the smartphone, it's like a part of that experience had to be connected to time spent scrolling mindlessly, whatever, social media, or the ESPN app to see who got traded today or whatever, And it really started bothering me because I realized, because the smartphone, I was like, it was post-college for me, when the smartphone came out. So I had like over 20 years of life where no smartphone, like I was perfectly content without any of that stuff. And then I sort of longed for that. And I think a lot of people can relate to this too. I remember finding myself asking the question, what did I do in lines back then? Like, what did I do? Because they still had lines. I still had to wait for at the grocery store, order lunch, or the DMV or whatever. Like, what did I do back then? And I realized what I did was sit with my own thoughts, or people watch, or observe my surroundings. In other words, I was just really present in my body and in my thoughts and in my environment. And so I just tried doing that a little bit more. and came to realize what an utterly different experience that is, to just live whole and fully in your body and in your experiences. And I found it to be a far more human experience. Like, I just felt more like a human being. Whereas I would find myself spending 10 minutes in a line scrolling social media. And at the end of it, typically I would find myself in sort of a daze, this like weird stupor. Like, what just happened for the last 10 minutes? Where am I? What have I been doing? None of it would stick. None of it would linger, So that's where it really started. And then, like in much more like really, really destructive ways, I was finding myself doing the same thing with my little kids. I'd be like physically present in the room, but completely absent in every other way. And I realized this is having, like, at the end of my life, I don't want my daughter to say, man, my daddy like was really prompt in returning emails. What a hero, like, I mean, come on, how ridiculous. Nobody wants that. And yet that was the life I was crafting. That was going to be on my tombstone. Like, Jay responded to emails within 24 hours. Like, what a hero. Like, that was going to be my tombstone. And so, yeah, I mean, I realized that's not the life I want. And so if that's not the life I want, I have to instill real discipline and intentionality in my life. Otherwise, that is the life I will have. That's just what I discovered. So that was kind of the genesis of the whole thing.
It's so good. I mean, your first book, Analog Church, I might have this wrong, but comes out the last day of March 2020, 2.5 weeks after the pandemic, and really in many ways is kind of the sibling to Analog Christian.
Yeah.
And yet everything then goes online. You know what I mean? And every all services and it's, and for many people, depending on the state that they lived in and the county or city, office hours changed, meeting as a congregation changed, and we're in this people business and office hours were different. And it was almost this kind of, well, this person has a need, and whether it's with COVID or whether it's with race or whether it's politics or this person's leaving the church, or you just found out this person moved to another state and left, Northern California or Chicago and moved down south or whatever, and all of this thing almost was like creating this frenzy of, man, if you don't respond, somebody else will. Somebody else will. And I think for pastors, at least let me just say, not say pastors in general, let me say it for myself. Like, it felt like every email had way more importance.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, though, I love how you said that. What's going to be on my tombstone? It's not that important, but it felt in the moment so important. And I just remember like talking to my wife, and I said, it's funny. I think for many of like the kids who grew up with boomer parents, these boomer parents like were gone and they were working. They were working so much, and especially if both parents were working, they were gone, and they found so much of their identity and their achievement. And I think so many kids were like, man, I wish I had more time with my parents.
Yeah.
I think our kids are going to say, oh, he was present.
Yeah.
He didn't work as hard like grandpa or grandma, but he wasn't fully present.
Yeah.
He was in the house, but he was always escaping.
Yeah.
He didn't know how, or she didn't know how to be. And that's again, when I feel like what you offer up in Analog Christian that really begins to say, hey, how, again, not shaming, but to really ask the question, what is this doing in us?
Yeah.
And so maybe let's just spend a few moments, because again, just from the pastors that are listening and the emerging voices that are just like, in Bible college that are listening, or student pastors who, they're connecting with students or congregants via email or social media, or trying, their communications person's like, you got to use Instagram more. That's where the people are. Keep posting on Facebook. You feel all these pressures, but it starts to own you.
Yeah.
And it starts to, I got to respond. How does Pastor J. Kim fight this in his actual everyday life?
Yeah. Yeah, in some ways that like is the question, because we can wax poetic about, and most people would agree. Like, yeah, no, I want a deep, meaningful life. Like, I want my tombstone, and I want my kids to say, no, my dad was here, and he was with me, and he was for me, and when I was with him, it felt like we were the only two people in the world. Like, we want that, right? So nobody is like, yeah, I want my legacy to be that I had a lot of Instagram followers. No, but nobody thinks that. Most people don't think that. And yet that's how our lives are being shaped. So Cal Newport is a fantastic writer, not a Christian writer, but in his book, Deep Work, he's got this great line, and I'm paraphrasing him, but he essentially says, if you live in a state of constant frenetic shallowness, that's the phrase he uses. If you live in a constant state of frenetic shallowness, you can never do deep work. So those two things are incongruent. Like, you literally cannot live in frenetic shallowness and accomplish deep, meaningful work. Not only like can you not do that at the same time, but what he's saying, and he's kind of like into neuroscience, so it's not just conjecture. He's saying that the research shows us if you live in a constant flow of frenetic shallowness, which is actually much of email and social media and all of that. It's not bad. I'm not saying it's bad. It's actually necessary, and it can be really good. But if you live in a constant state of that sort of frenetic shallowness, you actually become hardwired into the sort of person who will really struggle to ever do deep work. Meaning, if you constantly live in that sort of state, even when you shut off the email and the social media and you sit down to do deep work, you will find that your body, your brain, like your neurons, they've been hardwired to like not be able to really do that deep work, which is in one sense, it's really frightening, but in another sense, it's really hopeful, just acknowledging that, because what it means is, and this is sort of how I would answer your question, what it means is, for me, I try my best to schedule those the times I have to spend in the frenetic shallowness. And I'm not saying emails are shallow, and I'm not saying they're always frenetic. I just mean the pace of how you move through digital realities is often frenetic, and it's often shallow because you're moving so quickly. So I just try to schedule it. Like, I don't have my email up all day on my laptop. I actually just got back from 3 weeks of vacation and completely deleted my email and my social media. I had an email responder. I got this from Andy Crouch. I had an email response that said, thanks for emailing. This email will not be read. Because I didn't want to come back to an inbox of 400 emails and just play catch up. I wanted to like really rest with my family, and I did for 3 weeks, and then come back clean slate. Like, I'm starting with a zero inbox, and we'll move forward from here. So I just try to schedule it. So I have a chunk of time blocked off on Monday afternoons, and it's Monday afternoons because I'm a bit more of a morning person. So my mind is sharper. So I try to do deep work in the morning. So I've got some key meetings in the mornings and then some study time on Monday mornings. And then all Monday afternoon, I just do frenetic stuff. So I check email, I catch up on email, because you and I, write and speak a little bit. It's sort of a necessary thing to be on social media.
Yeah.
And it's not bad. It's not bad. It's helpful. There's actually like really meaningful dialogue and interaction that happens there. So I'll do some social media stuff on Monday afternoons as well. And then I just shut it off. And then I don't do it again until like Wednesday afternoon. And then, and so scheduling it has been really helpful for me because I have time blocked off. I don't have to freak out that, oh my gosh, when am I going to get back to that email? It's like, no, it's on my calendar. Like, I'll get back to it. And most of the folks on our team here sort of understand that rhythm in my life as well. And so, yeah, that's just kind of how I do it. It's not necessarily the rule for everybody, but works for me.
It's so good though. I remember we were chopping it up a day before, and you had told me about that email that response. And I was like, that is just genius. This email will not be read. But it's funny because, I'm currently driving, from Arizona to Chicago. So we've moved there. We've got one vehicle left to go. So I'm making this drive, and I realized I didn't bring my iPhone charger. Oh. And so last night, our first stop, my first stop is in Moab, and I get to the hotel and I'm like, my phone's dead. And it was weird. I was like, okay, well, you know what? I'll just go walk from the hotel into downtown Moab and find a restaurant and then maybe pick up a charger. And I have this theory that I try to, I like the Cal Newport line, but this thing that helps me get into the deep work, which is every day you have to make choices against yourself. I have to make choices against what I want.
Yeah.
And so what I wanted was just to go to the first gas station I found and saw and get a charger and charge my phone up and be on my phone while I eat by myself at this restaurant in Moab. But I'm like, nope, make choices against yourself. Let's just do it. But it was wild. I just sat at this little restaurant for 45 minutes by myself. And I'm literally like not knowing what to do with my hands. You know what I mean? Like you're like, I'm like looking around. Like I already look like, oh, here's a guy by himself. Like I just like in the thought, like people are like, he's not even looking at his phone. I'm just like looking like somebody talk to me, but you're realizing I'm not getting these dopamine hits.
Yeah.
I'm not. And so all of a sudden I could feel in my body, man, like, this is a territory that we haven't often been to.
Yeah.
And so, but it just was fascinating then just to go, okay, well, what can I discover in this moment? How to be present. So I love just even the thought, and I just started thinking and obviously then just going into this interview, thinking about this more and just going, man, I wonder if there has to be almost like office hours for my phone. Like, and I just love the way you talked about that. Okay, Monday afternoons or Wednesday afternoons, because this thing you don't think you are the product, but like that Social Dilemma talks about, that documentary, is you become that, and that's the addiction.
Yeah.
How do you communicate this? I mean, you live in Silicon Valley. Like most of the people that go to Westgate, I assume are a part of Google and Apple, and you know what I mean? And you deliver this kind of message and they're like, hey man, like it's like you in Detroit talking about don't drive cars. You know what I mean? Like, how do you speak to this technological advancement that is so good in so many areas? But with great power comes great responsibility, like Spider-Man theology. How do you do that in your unique context?
Yeah. Well, one surprising thing, maybe it's not that surprising for people, is actually there's a real appetite for this kind of conversation here in the Silicon Valley. And I think a big part of that is, when you make the stuff that is so ubiquitous in our lives, and you see sort of behind the curtain, because you're right. The majority of our church, where our campus, you've been here, Steve, our campus is actually about a 10, 15-minute drive to that big giant spaceship main Apple campus. And we've got a lot of folks at our church work at Apple, or their spouse works at Apple in a variety of divisions and departments. And then a lot of folks who work at Google, and then a lot of folks who work at, startups and smaller tech companies. So tech, most of our people, I would safely say, work in some form of tech, because that's the industry here. But you'd be surprised, I think, to find how many of them, because they're sort of like inside baseball, like they see behind the curtain, they see the sort of strategy behind some of the stuff. You'd be surprised at how many of them are not only open, but really yearning for thoughtful dialogue about this technology and about how it might be forming us. And actually, they've taught me a ton, because obviously they're not just like wholeheartedly against technology. If they were, they wouldn't be working in tech. They wouldn't live here in the Silicon Valley. And neither am I. So what I've learned from them is it has to be nuanced. It's not sort of like good versus evil. It's not like good humans versus the evil technological robots. It really is who's in control. And just outside of the church, the question is the technology controlling me, or am I controlling and leveraging the technology? For the life of the Christian, is the Spirit of God guiding and shaping me, or are my technological addictions and proclivities shaping and guiding me? And so at our church, and at a lot of churches in the area, that sort of dialogue is really welcomed. I just had coffee like 2 weeks ago with a good friend of mine who's on the design team for the Apple Watch. And he's like one of the guys who created this thing. And, so this guy was a part of the team, one of the main sort of, mad scientists in their lab who offered this incredible new device to the world. And he's not anti-tech. He's not a Luddite. Doesn't live on a farm and churn his own butter or whatever. He uses tech, but there's a level of thoughtfulness for him, and especially with his kids. So he's got a couple middle schoolers and then an elementary age kid, and he's not anti-tech with them in terms of like they never use tech, but he's got a whole system down, like when they have tech time, when they don't, monitoring it as parents, all this kind of stuff. So there's a deep level of thoughtfulness, I think, from the people who make this stuff, which I think should give all of us who don't make the technology like real pause. Because these are men and women who see behind the curtain. They understand not just the technology, but the philosophy behind the technology and what it's intended to do, both good and bad. And they're some of the most thoughtful people I know about it. So in many ways, I think our congregation has taught me more about this and sort of spurred me on in this direction than the other way around. And that's been a real gift. So yeah, people ask me that a lot in interviews, like, what a weird thing. You're a pastor in Silicon Valley and you're writing sort of like about the dangers of technology or something. And I wouldn't categorize it that way. I think it's more about the dangers of like the human condition and how these sorts of things can wrap themselves around us. But really, if you think about it, it makes sense that I would write about these things because I'm just surrounded by the people who think about it all the time.
Well, and I think, whenever I'm kind of prepping a message, there's some words that stand out to me often are ache. What's the ache of the person that's in the room? What's the good desire? And that's, again, what your book does so well. And every time I hear you teach, I feel like you're always calling out good desire. And I think desire often gets so shamed, like, oh, you're it's evil to have desires. And I think there's a good desire. I want to be content. I want to live that abundant life that Jesus invites us into. But there's also another word that I think about when I'm looking at a text, which is strongholds. What is the cultural strongholds? So if the words that I teach can speak to this ache and call out these good desires, what strongholds will you naturally go after that will allow more opportunity for people to experience that the kingdom of God is actually near? It's near and here.
So good.
And I think that's what you do. And that's what this book, in my opinion, does, is it goes after these strongholds that I think has almost snuck up on us when you think about those words like frenzy or impatience or lack of presence or just not content, needing to escape, needing to be distracted. This is like hitting all of these strongholds. I'm curious for you, when you are shaping a talk, and you probably have different language for maybe what you call it, but you do a great job of not shying away from these areas that are dangers, as you said it, to the human condition. Can you just talk about, in your message prep, how you just tried to make space to attack that in a healthy and more kingdom-minded way?
Yeah. Yeah, I got this from a dear friend of mine who you know, Steve Clifford, who was the lead pastor at the church where I served for 20 years. He used to do this thing every Saturday night before he was going to preach. He said he would sit on his couch and pray, but his prayer was not words. He would think about whatever sermon he was preparing, and that might be like a week or two out, or it might be the sermon he's about to give the next morning. But he would sit and he would close his eyes and literally imagine our room. And as detailed as possible, he would try to see the people in the room, like real people, not hypothetical made up avatars, but real people he knew in our church. And he would do this not just on Saturday nights before preaching, but he would do it sometimes in his prep time. And so he would imagine people in the room, and then his prayer time was literally just thinking about them and what he knew about their lives and what he knew that they were going through. And sometimes he would allow the Spirit of God to sort of bring other people to mind. And then in his imagination, he would now see, Bob and Cindy kind of sitting over on the left, or Joanne or Michelle or Susan over here, or, Jim over there. And he would see these folks. He would think about what he knew was happening in their lives, which reminds me, that's what I thought of when you talked about, and I've heard you talk about it before. I think it's so good thinking about aches in people's lives and then strongholds that are sort of keeping them enslaved, to that pain and that grief and that loss. And so I've tried to practice that. In fact, when I wrote the first book, Analog Church, because I wrote it primarily for church leaders, I remember I printed out pictures, like black and white pictures of pastor friends of mine, and I would stick them on top of like on the wall behind my laptop as I would type the words, because I wanted to make sure I was talking to people. Like, I didn't want to just write a book into the ether, and it really helped. And so I try to do the same thing when it comes to sermons, which is why we were talking about earlier, when you go speak somewhere where you're not familiar with the people, for me, I just ask a lot of questions. And then I try to connect what I hear about the folks who are going to be there to real people I know, like, oh man, that sounds a lot like what, Larry and, and Michelle are going through. So I'm going to think about them as I prep and sort of prayerfully write, not necessarily just to them, but really for them, and ask God to speak through me to these specific people. For me, that's been really helpful. Just specificity of like, who am I talking to? And really not just because I want the sermon to land really well for that person, but because I want the sermon to be in some ways an act of prayer for that person, and that's how I think it becomes, like we were saying earlier, I think that's how it becomes a gift that we receive from God, and then a gift that we steward to give to others, that it's a prayer that we pray as we're prepping and preaching and teaching.
So fascinating. I feel like for so many years, I've held to this belief, the word prepare means before you go public, that your prep was so important. And often if I'm really, really honest, it was around content and ideas and getting that content, that manuscript into my bones, so I could preach that. And there would be prayer, throughout my day, or little moments, but I know that there wasn't enough pre-prayer as part of how I prepare. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't have that of the visualization or the sitting, and it's I think one of the gifts of these last few years has been really recognizing the importance of that pre-prayer before you teach. And I never thought of it like that, to think about the room, because most people sit in the same spot, and I'm just, even as you were talking about going, what, in Chicago, next time I teach, I think I'm going to just take a picture of the room and and just start to print that out and just start to see those faces and, kind of tell some stories around that and know that that's just super, super helpful.
Hey, can I turn the tables really quick, Steve? Because, I'm going to interview you because I was like so fascinated by this thought. So you teach, you're one of my favorite teachers on the planet, incredibly gifted. But one of the things I find so fascinating about you, because I've been in the room when you do this, you walk into rooms of a wide variety of sizes and backgrounds and stories. I mean, you travel and speak at so many places, but also such different places. And I've been in the room when you walk in, and for some reason, and this isn't because we're friends now. It's like before that, long before I knew you personally, I would watch you walk into rooms, and you would feel like a friend. Like you would start teaching. It's like, oh, that's my buddy Steve. And then you realize I've never met Steve. He doesn't know me. And yet it feels like we're buddies. So I'd be curious to know, because a lot of your teaching rhythm right now in this season of your life is like literally in all sorts of rooms all over the country. Yeah. What do you do? How do you do it? Is it just a God thing in you, the way he's wired you, that you can walk into a room and feel so relatable and personal? Or are there steps, processes, practices you implement to be able to do that? Because it's like a real gift that you have. I've always been curious about it.
Well, yeah. Well, thanks. This is the first time someone's like turned it on me and no, I'm supposed to be interviewing you and telling the world how awesome and proud I am of this book. I would say backstory is before I knew Christ, the person I wanted to be was Ferris Bueller. I wanted to be the guy that people knew, you know what I mean? And so I think there's a plus to that. And there's definitely a side to that was all ego and need to be needed. But what I always respected about Ferris was that he was the guy that people would turn to, that he knew what people needed. He knew and so you used a word 10 minutes ago, and I'm going to struggle to say it. It's one of the two hardest words for me to say. The first one's similarly. The second one is specificity. But I really work on that. Whenever I'm going to speak at a new place, I ask the pastor, hey, what's a win? I asked the pastor, hey, can you send me 3 talks from a guest communicator that it just worked? It just worked. So good. Can you send me 1 or 2 that didn't? And so I typically, before I ever go teach somewhere, I've listened to 5 talks that I go, man, like that, I can see why that didn't work. And then a little like inside baseball is every place has these cultural unspoken. And most people, when it doesn't work, when they step into a new place, is that they weren't clear on what the win was, or they just accidentally stepped into a cultural unspoken that they didn't know. And so I tell this story. I spoke at a church in Indiana, and I asked the question to the creative director and the pastor, and I said, hey, is there anything I shouldn't say, or any pain point that I need to be aware of that might, I don't know, if I said it, everyone's mind's going to go there, and I'm just not going to know, but I'm going to lose the room. Yeah. And I'll never forget that the executive producer is in this room, and she goes, hey, nobody's ever asked us that question, but thank you. Because last year, somebody pulled out of the parking lot and got T-boned, and it killed this family. That was really near and dear to our church. And the guy preaching last week was a guest, and it was an incredible message. But his end line, like as he was ramping down, was, and you never know. You could be pulling out of the parking lot and get hit by a car, and you will not have reached your friends. And the whole, that's all they thought about. There's this family that everybody knew. The guy didn't know. It wasn't an intent. It just was. So for me, the more specifics that I can know around around hey, what is the church praying for? Where do you feel stuck at? Is there something that's happening in your context that I should just be aware of. My last time at Flatirons, I think the week before I got there was the massive fire.
Oh yeah.
And I had to change part of my message. So you just learn to go, man, I gotta flex here, because if I'm bringing that gift that God has entrusted to me, and I want that spirit to have that work before it hits their ears, man, I part of my preparation has to be that. And so that's it. And then I just really try to work is like, how do I not feel like a guest teacher, but how do I feel like family? That's the thing I'm constantly looking for. I want to be as easy as possible for producers and tech and sound people and worship. I want to I don't want them to have to like worry about green room. I just want to be easy, family, and so those are just the things that go through my mind. So
that's awesome. Yeah, that's super helpful to me. Thanks, man.
Well, I appreciate you, bro. Okay, hey, one, maybe just take a couple moments, and my kind of wrap up question is just obviously all around character, and again, that's part of the reason I think that I love you so much and trust you in your writing and your teaching, and just you're just so honest and human, which I just so love, and constantly just wrestling with difficult conversations that can be dangerous to the human condition or to your human condition, and yet looking for ways for the kingdom to break in, the spirit to break in. What for you? I mean, when you write a book, you're usually done with the book, a year before it comes out, and so, and now everyone wants to talk about, just the deep work of, digital contentment and all of this stuff. But maybe like the new well that J. Kim is digging and sitting in around your character. What's something that God's just been teaching you, and how are you fostering that?
Man, yeah, thanks for asking that question. It's somewhat connected to digital age stuff, but it is definitely a more specific divergent path. I think, I'm thinking about lots of things that are sort of localized to our community here. So that takes up a ton of my sort of brain and heart space. But an overriding theme that I think I've been thinking about quite a bit for probably years now, but really focused thinking about it, is listening. I've just been thinking a lot about listening. I've recently, at the beginning of 2022, transitioned into a particular role here officially transitioned into a specific role here at Westgate, where the expectation publicly is that I have a lot to say, that I should just say stuff, like tell us where we're going and how we're going to get there and what you think about this particular controversy or that. And I embrace that. I understand that that's a tremendous part of the role. But what I have found is that I, like me, Jay, in and of myself, I'm mostly at a loss about most things that are hard. So like the big controversy or the big, decision or the next, the steps we're going to take to get to wherever, it's actually quite odd that I'm in the position that I'm in, because I don't think, there's parts of me, I'm quite driven, and that can get really dangerous if I'm not careful. I'm an Enneagram 3. So like my image and pride and ego, those are all constant struggles. But when I'm really honest with myself, most of the time I'm sort of at a loss. So I have a decision to make. I can either like fake it till I make it. And the danger is, because people like you and I have been talking publicly for a long time, I really can fake it till I make it. Like it's like, this is not, like credit to me. I'm sharing this as a danger. Like I'm pretty good at faking it. Yeah. Like I can get up in a room, I can stand in front of our staff, and I know enough Bible verses, and I'm sophisticated enough of a sinner where I can twist and turn those passages, make them work for the point that I want to make, and really just do it to get elicit an emotional response, and make sure I've got all my staff motivated and inspired enough to walk out those doors and do what I'm asking them to do. I can fake that, which is really dangerous. And so, because what it does is like, it's just completely me. It's void of what the Spirit of God is doing in and through me. So I've been thinking a lot about honing my ears and my spirit to listen to God. So I actually just recently reread, and I've probably read it 3 or 4 times, going back to Dallas Willard, his book, Hearing God, is like so helpful. And I just picked up, Peter Gregg's book on prayer, and I'm excited to dive into that. I've just heard such incredible things. So I think that's the big idea that I'm just kind of circling right now, and not just as an idea, but trying to live the listening life. And then getting comfortable enough, even in my leadership role, to tell our people and our staff and others, I don't know that I've really heard from God yet. I think I'm still listening. And to not allow the pace of culture to speed me up past where God has me. And that's hard to do, especially today, where, in some ways, like pastorally, I do have to respond in a timely fashion when something happens culturally. But I'm realizing that it's okay for me to respond with, well, here is what is timeless and true about the scriptures and the way of Jesus. Like when an injustice occurs, I don't have to wait. Like the scriptures make clear, God is a God of justice. So that's where we stand. We stand on the side of justice. But then parsing that out and all the nuanced details of it, I'm realizing it's okay for me to not have the answers, but instead to say, we're going to seek God together. So like here at our church, I just stepped into the lead pastor role at the beginning of the year, and there was like all this push and pull about let's change this, let's change that, new vision for our church, all this stuff. And instead what we did, and I'm not saying this because I'm like a spiritual person, I'm saying it because I just need God, and without him, I couldn't do anything. So the first 6 months of me stepping into the lead role of our church community, the emphasis has just been on prayer and fasting. We've just prayed and fasted for 6 months. So our entire staff, 1 meal a week, we've just been praying and fasting together. And here we are 6 months later. And I think I've definitely heard some things from God, but honestly, and I hope this is not disappointing or disheartening for leaders. It's not like God has said, here's the new vision for the church, and in 3 years, you're going to become this. That's not what's happened. Actually, what's happened is some sin has been exposed, and there's been a lot of pain and loss because of that. But also God's goodness has been really abundant. Little things have happened, like some key relationships that were really rocky beginning to mend. And that's not very public. Like nobody, the thousands of people who call our church home, they don't know that. They wouldn't see that, but it's really pivotal for us. So, God speaks in whispers, and sometimes the movement of God as we listen feels like a whisper level movement. But I just really believe, that God's timeline is very different than ours. And to find beauty and goodness and immense hope in that has been so rejuvenating and refreshing for me. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm just trying to live the listening life.
I love that. The first interview we did together, the takeaway was all around learning how to linger, and how as a community you were just trying to learn to make space just to linger, and then just to like underneath the linger to get better at listening. And I think there's just this natural kind of progression to be able to listen, but to hear God, to need to hear God, to not have to fake it, and to really sit in that. Because you're right, like you and I are gifted enough to fake it, but what people really, really want is to be brought in. And I think people are smart enough now to go, no, that's not, that's more ego than it is actual, man, that feels like the heart of God, So I just love that. J. Kim, I'm just so grateful for you. Hey, I'm proud of you. I don't say that in a patronizing way. I mean, I say that as a dear friend of, I think anybody listening to this, if you're a pastor, if you're just a disciple living in this digital age, I'm telling you, this book, Analog, Christian is as good as they come. And it is thoughtful, but it casts a vision of what a life that is present and a life of contentment, a life that I'm longing for more of. And this book made me want to not just like long for it more, also showed me steps and ways and places that I could literally begin to embody it. So thank you for the ways that you pastor, for your preaching. Thanks for your character. And thanks for the gift that you are to me as a friend and to the kingdom, bro. I love you. And so just so grateful for Christ at work in you, man.
Oh, thanks so much, Steve. Yeah, love to you too.
Well, thanks so much for tuning into the Crafting Character podcast. I hope that you loved that conversation with Pastor J. Kim. He's so special. Well, hey, I just want you to know, my friends and I at Preaching Today, we want to help you. I love their site because they got sermon illustrations. They got stuff to care for the soul and heart of the pastor like you and me. And they've got some work, some articles and exegesis. It's just a place for me to go and get a spark of care, a spark of inspiration. And you know what? They want to actually help you. And they have this whole heart to do that. So you can go to orderptnow.com/cc30 and they'll give you 30% off your subscription price for the next year, just because you're a listener of the Crafting Character podcast. And we've got some amazing preaching cohorts coming up. Nancy Beach is leading one. We've got an amazing crew for that. Dave Stone's got one coming up. So go to theascentleader.org, check it out. And then Food for the Hungry. I'm so excited. I'm going on my first trip in September, and I can't wait to get to the Dominican Republic. I hear the stories of how Food for the Hungry just continues to do such incredible work. And if that's ever you want to learn more about FH, the holistic work they're doing on the ground, let me know. And maybe we can even go on a trip together. That would be fun. But anything I can ever do to serve you, shoot me an email, steve@steveryancarter.com. Love to connect with you. You can always reach us on Instagram @craft and character. Much love, everyone. Grace and peace.